So thank you for connecting today to today's panel discussion series, Leadership in a Post-COVID-19 World. We will be conducting a series of discussions on this topic over the course of the next 6 months to investigate how leadership is changing post-COVID-19 with perspectives from across the globe. Today, we will be talking with a group of panelists from the EMEA region, sharing their point of view on this topic. CEMS will also be putting together a white paper with expert insights from across the Alliance that we will share later with you this year. If you would like to join in a future panel discussion or share your thoughts, we welcome you to send us an email following this session. As we are becoming more attuned to working virtually, there are many resources from CEMS that have been developed over the last few months, including webinars and podcasts. In addition, the CEMS magazine has just been published, which focuses on the future of work, including industry insights into how companies have adapted during this pandemic. You can find this and more at CEMS.org. Now I would like to introduce you to the chair of today's discussion, Dr. Professor Marie Chezkov. She is a professor at the Institute for Gender and Diversity in Organizations at the WU University of Economics and Business in Vienna, Austria. She teaches on the CEMS program and is part of the CEMS Global Leadership and Cross-Cultural Management faculty group. Before that, she was Professor of International and Cross-Cultural Management at Leuven School of Management and ICHEC Brussels Business School. In addition, she holds guest professorships at several other universities in Europe, Asia, and the United States, was Dean of the Faculty of Business and the Asian University Thailand, and Director of the Executive MBA at LSM. She is also consultant and coach for relocation, diversity management, and global leadership. She has worked as consultant to various companies and is a former president of the Society for Intercultural Education, Training and Research, and the European Women's Management Development International Network. She is also a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and a Fulbright in Japan Foundation alumna. Thank you for your time today, Marie-Therese. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet. I would like to introduce the panel, the members of the panel first, so that you know who you're talking to and who is talking to you. So Seren Bayramoglu.
Hi.
Right, there we are.
Hi,
she is joining us from Milan. She is a CEMS Corporate Partner with the CEMS Corporate Partner Whirlpool as HR Director. HR Director, Total Rewards and Talent. Yeah, and she's holding the role of HR Director Talent and HR Transformation as well. She joined Whirlpool from General Electric in 2017 and has worked in Istanbul, London, Dubai, and her last role at GE was the Compensation and Benefits Director for Middle East Africa region. So managing the compensation and benefits for over 11,000 employees in, 35 countries. She completed a master's degree in organizational behavior as well. And she started with Shell in Turkey, where she worked for 5 years also in different HR roles. Then I would like to introduce Tobias Marman, who is joining us from Hamburg in Germany, but usually lives in Berlin. He is a UCD ESADE CEMS graduate and a recruitment expert who has worked for some of the world's leading technology companies. He started actually with Google in Ireland during a project, and that project was about a university programs team, yeah, a project assignment. And that's where he discovered actually his passion for recruiting. Yeah, he looked for after the business internship programs in Dublin and Wrocław in Poland, campus recruitment, but also in the DACH. Have you ever heard this DACH? It was new to me. It means Germany, Austria, Switzerland, yeah, Deutschland, Österreich, Switzerland, and also in the Benelux, which is better known, I think, than the DACH region. So his responsibilities in the university programs team changed regularly and allowed him to work on MBA talent acquisition across Europe, as well as engineering recruitment based out of Boston in the US. He then moved to Amsterdam, to Uber and Juniper Networks, still in the student graduate space, And for the past 3 years, he's been working at Tesla. Do you have the car, Tobias? Yeah, working at Tesla, where he built the European Early Talent Team from scratch, actually. And since January, he builds and leads Tesla's recruitment team for its Gigafactory near Berlin. That's where he lives. He is also very interesting, actually, consulting students on the CEMS GAMP mentoring platform. The GAMP mentoring, I had to look it up actually, means Global Advisory Mentoring Platform for CEMS students and CEMS graduates, which is interesting. So then I will move to Christina Cote. Christine is joining us from London, where she works at LSE. She has 20 years of experience in leadership roles across business, government, academia. And her areas are international trade, investment, global strategy. She's currently senior lecturer in practice in the Department of Management at the London School of Economics, and also the academic director for the CEMS Masters in International Management in London at LSE. She's also a member of LSE's International Trade Policy Unit, lecturing on the program in advanced trade negotiation for the UK government, and a regular consultant to global companies through LSE Enterprise. Before entering academia, Dr. Cote worked as an international trade negotiator with the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, Canada, representing Canada in negotiations at the WTO, the OECD, and on bilateral trade and investment agreements. Prior to this, she worked as a strategy, policy, and economics consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers out of London, and was responsible for advising governments in Europe, Africa, and Asia on institutional development, public sector reform, major strategic public policy decisions. So she was also a political advisor, actually, in the office of the Prime Minister of Canada. Welcome, Christine. We have Rebecca Enroth, who is joining us also from London. Rebecca is a principal at Equilibrium, a leading sustainability-driven real asset investor. And she is responsible for the activities of this company, Equilibrium, in Europe and in the Middle East, and she joined there actually in 2014. She started her career in the M&A, mergers and acquisitions team at Merrill Lynch Europe, and worked in investment banking in London and Frankfurt. She then joined Fitch Ratings as a director in the energy and utilities team, covering Northern European companies, followed then by working at Morgan Stanley as a vice president in the credit rating advisory team, covering numerous sectors, including renewable energy. She switched to focus on capital raising at Pantheon, one of the largest global private equity funds or fund of funds based in London, as principal in the client services teams, and served as Pantheon global co-head of responsible investing. Rebecca holds a Master of Science in Economics and Business Administration from Stockholm School of Economics, and she completed the CEMS degree, including also an exchange at Erasmus Universiteit in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. And she's actually also at the moment the CEMS, the president of the CEMS Alumni Association. So welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you.
So Fadi Farah is also CEMS alumnus, and he is actually a co-founder, director, and partner at White Shield Partners. And White Shield Partners is actually a CEMS corporate partner as well. He has more than 20 years of experience in strategy consulting and policy advisory globally, including industrial and innovation policies, agribusiness, microeconomics, private sector development, and competitive policies. Fadi is an academic and senior lecturer as well at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and that since 2009. Prior to funding this company, White Shield Partners, He was a senior economist and head of unit at OECD after a career in strategy consulting with the Boston Consulting Group and A.T. Kearney in New York and London. He chaired the Global Agenda Council on the Future of Manufacturing Council of the World Economic Forum and is a regular commentator in global media. So these are our panel members, and we are very much looking forward to your comments on this, on the research actually that CEMS did. Actually, what happened is that we are aware of the huge impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and CEMS decided to find out how our alumni, our CEMS alumni and corporate partners have been affected, which is of course interesting much more widely to the business world. So CEMS launched a survey and got a very, very interesting response rate, an immense response rate of 1,746 global CEMS alumni and corporate partners filled out the survey. And well, we expected something like that, but strikingly still, 87% of the respondents believe that the way the company does business globally would change and would have changed as a result of the pandemic. For some, the change has been devastating. Some lost their jobs and some lost their revenue. We had a lot of comments even for the registration of the event today that cover a wide range actually of experiences, some positive, some negative, and some mixed. But we hope that whatever the experience, this discussion here will provide interactive opportunities to all, so that we can share and learn from one another. So to start with, actually, we would like to ask you a question, and there will be a poll. You can vote, and we would also encourage you to share your thoughts in the chat, right? But this is the first poll question. Do you believe the pandemic has changed the way we work in the long term? Please vote. Wow. Okay. For some people there who have been very lucky or very in a strange situation because it hasn't changed the way they work. But most of us will say that yes, it has changed the way we work in the long term. Yeah, there will be results of this in the long term. So if we start with that idea of the changing, I would say the changing DNA of the organization, I would like to start with Fadi actually. Fadi, you are this director, co-founder actually of the international consultancy White Shield, right? You're consulting in strategy and policy. Can you tell us how things have changed for you? Do you believe that, as we say, you know, the DNA of global organizations will be changed, yeah, forever, permanently? And will there ever be back to normal, or will there be no normal anymore? What's your idea?
Tobias, thank you very much. Well, I think the question is, what is normal? And we have maybe to put this into perspective. To step back, I think we have maybe two types of reactions. We have the survivors and we have the opportunity grabbers. The survivors, they pretty much trying to sustain their own business model. They cut costs, they impacted their staff, and simply they try to survive the wave that we're going through. But then you have the opportunity grabbers, and I think those maybe identified some underlying values and are trying to ride these values. And if I had to maybe name them, this is not about behavior. It's not about the fake background that you see behind me, where we're all sitting in our homes or offices. It's about one simple example. If you remember in the crisis, people were developing their own mask. They were putting some guidelines online, and there were no governments involved. There were no companies involved. It was simple people to people. And I think those questions are not behavioral. They're about two values, the value of trust and the value of resilience. And when we talk about trust, the foundation is we believe that we have to concentrate trust because it's faster and more efficient. in governments, in corporate leaders, and so on. But maybe here, there's a big learning about actually relying less on trusts and decentralizing. And that, for me personally, in the firm, meant delegating much more and trusting a lot more within the firm. The second is resilience. And resilience is typically thought about something intemporal. It's resistance to those shocks. We tend to think short term. We tend to think buying back shares on the short term, trading, and so on. Even some spoke about a horizon of 2, 3, 5 years. I think we should get a 10-year horizon minimum, and therefore rethinking what should be the time horizon. So I think, in a nutshell, your question, what has changed for me? What has changed for me is trusting a lot more people within the firm, but also thinking as a firm investments for the next 10 years in R&D and innovation.
Mm. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. So you do think that there will be no normal or a different normal or whatever there will be.
Well,
we will see about that. I would like to ask Christine actually, and open it up to a wider international business, you know, because of your experience in international business. Do you also think that there will be a long-term impact in the way global businesses, global organizations will work?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Marie-Thérèse. I think that's a really interesting question, and I think it's one that many organizations are still trying to figure out. I would say that we're seeing a number of impacts to global organizations as a result of COVID. I would say both in terms of where they're choosing to operate, and I think also how their operations are changing. And I guess the question is really whether these are permanent changes or, you know, whether they're short-term responses to the pandemic. So I guess first I would say in the area of, we think, global trade and production, I think firms are facing a lot of newer restrictions to where they can sell their products, whether they're goods or services. So while we can all think of a lot of industries that I think have been thriving under the current situation, you just have to think about, for example, medical supplies or digital entertainment companies like Netflix. There are a lot of those examples, but I think many companies are facing quite extensive challenges. I think if you look at services, for example, they require normally the free movement of people across borders. And obviously this pandemic has had a huge impact on that, a huge impact as a result of travel bans and quarantines. So the travel industry, for example, has seen a 24% drop globally so far in 2020. And we've also seen just general border restrictions, COVID-related protectionism that they've had to face. So this is all impacting their ability to access the markets they would normally access. And I would say just protectionism that we're seeing, obviously this was an issue before COVID. We can think of Brexit, we can think of the US-China trade war, but COVID served to sort of exacerbate that. So that's the first one. The second thing I would say is that firms are facing restrictions and changes really to where they're producing. So traditionally, you know, we think of global companies and they've had to source their inputs and produce globally through global value chains or establishing their own global production facilities. And today we're seeing a bit more of a shift away from that, this global production. You know, really because firms are seeking to mitigate the risks they're facing to their global supply chains as a result of COVID. Shifts to things like regional supply chains, or even in some cases reshoring, where firms are deciding to produce back home. Foreign direct investment, for example, has fallen by 40% in 2020. So firms are not investing in overseas due to the uncertainty. And I would say, again, this is a trend we were starting to see before COVID, but COVID has really served to exacerbate it. And the final point, which I won't go into in detail, but is something I'm really interested in as well, is the impact that COVID's having on global cities. You know, the role global cities have played for multinationals in the past, and the fact that people are now working from home and firms are looking to shift out maybe to the periphery or to smaller cities. So that's having an impact on the global city itself. So I guess I'll leave it there because I know we're short on time, but I think those are some of the impacts I'm seeing for the global firm.
Right. Quite dramatic impacts. And I think it will be linked to what Rebecca can tell us about this sustainability and production and so on and so forth. But I would like to go to Seren first, and I would like, you know, if we look at all these changes and as Fadi said, we need different kind of management with more trust and resilience and etc. So you are HR Director at Talent, right, at Whirlpool. And has your company responded to that crisis in a particular way? Can you give us an example, or how does a company like yours
Sure.
handle the crisis?
Sure, sure. No, I'll be very happy to speak about that. So firstly, I must say that this was not something that we came across earlier, right? So we really learned it on the spot. Of course, we had some crisis management plans, but I can already confirm that this was not to this extent that we were planning. So we had to be extremely agile in the way that we deal with this for our employees, customers, shareholders. And I think the practice that we really benefit a lot from is that we built a crisis management team like on the very, very first days. And this crisis management team was not only to, kind of manage the employee safety. Of course, it was a big part, but it was also the employee safety, financial exposure, and business continuity. And so what we have done is that we built a crisis management team immediately, and we had 3 streams, and under the 3 streams, we had, leaders dealing with this. But underpinning that, there was a very important stream that is called communications. And by experience, I can say that this has been absolutely critical for, I don't want to say success, because this is not about success, but to keep things under control. Because you have to communicate really promptly, clearly, in a very balanced way, so that the employees really feel, feel comfortable to continue in this environment. But of course, not only your employees, your trade partners, and all the stakeholders that you have. So I think I can say that these are the key critical, initial steps that we took on. But then other than that, immediately what we have done is we took certain things under control. So for instance, how are we going to tackle travel? How are we going to tackle remote work? How are we going to tackle supply chain stabilization? And I can say that this supply chain and the need to develop the supply chain function came as a big item as a result of this crisis. And I know that we have some students maybe listening to us. I can say that supply chain even became a more critical function as a result of this crisis. And then I think the last thing that I can say here is that, being able to do the right tracking, forecasting in this crisis environment has been absolutely critical. So I think these are the things that we've seen in this period. And not only that we've seen and we did, but we also saw where we really need to invest more.
Right. Thank you very much. There are several of these points that I think actually came out in the survey as well. Like, this communication, the difference in communication, and as Fatih said, the resilience and trust and things like that, is something that we certainly need to develop. And we will come back also to the idea of how do we train future managers, and maybe supply chain and communication skills and things like that will come up again as well. Yeah. So Rebecca,
yeah,
you work in the financial world, which is a completely different area and a different discipline and a different world, right? It is not production, it is not manufacturing. So do you think your world, that financial world, was affected as well?
First, thanks for hosting. And I would say that I also have a production angle in my work, but I think as in many other sectors, certain areas within the finance sector has been doing very well while others have struggled. Yeah. I guess it's a bit like if you compare it with the travel sector. If you're a tour operator selling trips for Europeans to the US, you're probably on the brink of bankruptcy. But if you're a local camping operator, you probably never had this much demand. from where I sit, I've seen an increased demand in trading and also refinancing due to market volatility, but I've seen a slower pace in M&A. So I am in asset management of private assets, which means that our revenue model is quite stable in the short to medium term. And the asset manager that I work for, we are focused on sustainability-driven real assets. So we are active in food, agriculture, water, waste, and distributed energy. And we think long-term, and we have actually been, I'm pleased to say that we have thrived in this environment. So I think with this pandemic, it has really been back to basics. And our underlying portfolio of assets have been doing very well as the demand for the produce and services that we offer has gone off the charts. So consumer, they want local and healthy food that we provide. And we have assets in the US that have also benefited from the lack of field production due to wildfires in the western states. So in these times, I think it's important that we are reminded that there is always more than one crisis going on. And I think it's coming back to the term that we always think is critical, and I think has been mentioned today. I think for any business, you have to think about the resiliency of your business model, because that's really what matters.
Yeah. Right. And as you said, probably this long-term thinking is one of the things you need to be able to do. And yeah, we hear this from Seren, we hear this from Christine, and etc. You know, it's having a vision in the longer term and not just the short term. And of course, the sustainability and all these things that have come back even, you know, have been accentuated in this crisis. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we should move to the next session, which would be about, in that situation, what kind of leaders do we need? And again, we will have a poll question for you. We asked people, you know, what kind of qualities of leaders did we need before? And what kind of leaders do we need after the crisis or during the crisis? Are they different, etc.? And it's very striking, actually, that some things that were seen as important, strategic vision, results focus, they're still important. But, you know, they have dropped a little bit. And some other things have come up much, much stronger, such as resilience, empathy as well, and the ability to communicate, indeed. So you can see that in your experiences as well, these things, they all come together. So there seems to be like paying attention not just to the bottom line, but a little bit how do we lead differently in a crisis like this, at least for now. So can we have poll number 2? And the question here would be, have you seen empathy and compassion developing in your environment since the crisis began? There's a lot of publication about empathy and compassion, even in the Financial Times. So it's interesting to see what you would think if you have seen it developing. Yes, 76%, huh? Right. That's impressive. Yeah. And of course, as Fadi said, you know, and Seren and everybody said, you know, communicating has become extremely important. And so it's one of the soft skills, as we call them, so on. So Tobias, you are very much involved in recruitment and selecting people and so on and so forth. So are you still looking for the same people, or are you looking for different kinds of leadership skills? What qualities are you looking for now? You know, has it changed?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Marie-Therese. And yeah, thanks for having us today here and hosting the panel. So I think some of the key skills that I'd be looking for in leaders today is, one really important thing is someone who can trust their team and who can really deal with change. I think trust is important because with the increase in working from home, you can't really have a micromanager who is afraid that people will be sitting at home and maybe, not doing what they're supposed to do. So people that really, trust their team. Dealing with change, I think that's an obvious one. We are living in a time where change is happening all the time. If you work in some of the fast-paced environments, like in tech, things are changing all the time anyways. But now I think also traditional businesses feel that much stronger because, like a recent example, I was trying to buy my kitchen during the crisis because I moved to Berlin. And, I called up some kitchen studios and I asked, so do you offer video, planning? Like, no, we don't do that. You have to email us and then we can go back and forth. And other companies embraced the new opportunity right away and said, of course, no problem. Next week, 10 o'clock, how does that work? We connect on Zoom or anything else. So I think really people that are able to deal with change and also can realize the opportunity or see the opportunities, because with every crisis, there's opportunities for new ways of doing things. And another really important piece is, the ability to deal or navigate ambiguity and uncertainty. I think that's super important. And because you still need to make decisions, even if you don't have all the information at hand. And I think that was a journey for me personally as well. When I remember when I started my career over 10 years ago, I was very hesitant to take a decision without having all the information because I was afraid I could be missing an important piece that could lead to a wrong decision. But making no decision sometimes is worse than taking the wrong decision, I think, because you can always learn from your mistakes and ensure that you don't do them again. But no decision often means stand still, and in a fast-moving world, that is not a good thing. And lastly, I think cultural fit is so important. You might find someone, you look at the CV and it's an excellent candidate and you think, that candidate is really going to fly through the recruiting process. And then you speak to the person and you realize, the personal views or the way of operating is so different to what, the company you work for has in its DNA, that it's just not going to work. And cultural fit is not something you can really put in a job description. It's something you have to find out during the interview process and when dealing with candidates. So those are some of the...
Can you just clarify what is cultural fit according to you?
Cultural fit, it's ensuring that the candidate and the organization kind of think along the roughly the same direction and have the same goals or means of getting there. So if I'm working for a company that's very collaborative and has flat hierarchies, I may not necessarily want to hire someone who's used to a reporting structure that, where the CEO or someone else signs off on every decision, does not empower employees. And those companies might exist, but it really depends. So it's a match between how the company operates and how the individual maybe operates in that bigger picture. It's not so easy to actually put that in words.
Is it the vision and the mission?
You definitely, I think, have to identify with that piece of a company, because I don't think you're going to be as successful as someone who really believes in the company and the products or the services, whatever it might be that the company does. I think it's a super important piece, because you really need to be passionate about what you're doing. You need to enjoy what you're doing. And if you can't believe in what the company is doing, I think it's going to be hard to be an ambassador for that company.
Okay, thank you very much. Fadi, I would like to come back to you actually, because you already mentioned some of these things that Tobias and the others have also mentioned, such as trust and communication and so on. And of course, all these what we call humane, or sometimes we call them soft skills, resilience, empathy, communication, they came out very strongly actually in our survey as what is needed from the leaders. But at the same time, these leaders would have to think of the bottom line. They still have to survive, and they still have to make money, and they still have to be productive, etc. So this kind of paradox, how do you manage it? What do you think that a successful leader would need to be able to manage this kind of paradox? And would it be different from what it was before?
Well, I'm hoping it's not a paradox. I'm hoping it's just a question of putting new lenses and simply having a reset on what matters. I think the main learning from the crisis has been what is the actual unit of analysis, what truly matters. Of course, the bottom line matters for companies, but at the end, the atom is people, is humans. And when we work with humans, you empower innovation, you empower thought-provoking ideas, and basically this is the value you bring to an enterprise. The issue we have is, whatever I learned as a CEMS student or as a CEMS partner or as a CEMS alumni, or anywhere else in the world, all the accounting standards account for people as costs, not as value. So in the P&L, you don't have something said, the value of this person is X. Talk about societies. We divide the world into public sector, private sector, civil society. We don't talk about the actual main unit, which is the people. Why am I saying this? Because at the end, what matters for me in Watcher Partners, I think for any leader, is your ability to, again, to innovate, to bring value. And that means not just communication and empathy, that means altruism, really caring about your people. But let me give you just one small anecdote. Over the past 6 months, we've been very close to governments and companies trying to reduce the level of infections. And when you see those curves that you've seen everywhere in the news and trying to flatten them, these are not just millions of data points, these are people. And when you see some of them infected and some of them not making it through, it really makes you a lot more humble about what we do. And the value of the euro compared to the value of the human makes it very, very clear at the end. So to close, I would say, let's think maybe less survival of the fittest, but more the Nash equilibrium. And maybe beyond long-term and trusts, let's really go back to what matters most, which is investing in the capabilities of people.
Right, thank you. You used the word altruism, and it made me think of a manager actually in Singapore recently who said, the skills that we need are ACE, A-C-E. And the A was for altruism, and the C was for compassion, and the E was for empathy. So all these words seem to come back, and all these, the thinking in leadership seems to shift a little bit to that kind. So the question now is, can we train people, or can we create future leaders in the CEMS program, for example, who will have all these technical qualities and at the same time all these humane qualities that we have mentioned, etc., who will be champions in supply chain, as Siren said, and at the same time will be resilient and empathetic, and will be trusting people and will be able to communicate well. Wow, yeah. So what can be done? How can a program like CEMS and how can business schools, train and cultivate leaders with new skills that we need? They're not new. They used to be there before, but now, of course, they have become critical. So that would be, another poll question for you. The poll 3.
Sorry, Marie-Therese, could we just pause for just 1 second? Tanya Krasnikov has asked a question for Tobias. If he could elaborate on how the importance of the cultural fit of leaders has changed with COVID.
I'm sorry, whom are you asking?
I think, yeah.
Tobias, yep.
All right.
Sure. So I think one of the things I would say is that people need to also have an appetite for risk taking, because at the moment there are a lot of risks associated, for instance, with taking a new position. There's no guarantee that the company you're joining won't be hit by something based out of the crisis or something else that might happen down the line. And yeah, I think risk taking is something that is important as well. So people that are willing to take a chance and not say, you know what, I'm comfortable. I've been with a company for 5 years. If they want to fire me, I have some safety and I have a good, good tenure, versus, going into a new venture, potentially having a probation period where, it's very easy to let someone go again. So I would say a healthy appetite for some risk as well, because typically when you do take a risk, there's also a nice upside or reward on the other hand. And yeah, that's what I would say to that question.
Yeah. Any other comment on this? Yes?
If I may just jump in, absolutely, trust yourself, take the risk. We did, every year we launch something called the Global Labor Resilience Index. And what it shows is, it's not your skills that really matter. It's your emotional intelligence, your capabilities that really matter in the longer term. So I would say, just from a personal perspective, don't hesitate to jump in terms of echoing what Tobias was saying.
Okay. So the poll question is, has your idea of good leadership changed since the pandemic started? That's 60% against 40%, which is interesting. Yeah, so people will say, I was a good leader before, and a good leader is a good leader. We have had good leaders. We had good leaders before, and the good leadership, actually, what does it mean, right? Maybe we need to talk a little bit about what it means, good leadership. Yeah, and I would like to start with Rebecca. How can you make sure that you have good leaders in your organization? How can you also drove those qualities needed? How can you drive them forward? How can you move people into these leadership skills?
Mm-hmm. So I think in tough times, the knee-jerk reaction of most companies tend to be to save cost. And I'm not dismissing this, but I think in tough times, it could also be an optimal time for companies to think out of the box and reshaping their business model, which normally requires input from staff, which means training staff, and also to provide training programs to their staff. So I recently learned about an excellent example from a distributor whose whole business model had to shift during the pandemic from B2B to B2C. And they needed to cut costs, admittedly, but they did put all their staff through IT training to help their business, and also created a new skill set for many of the employees. And I think companies also and leaders have the responsibility to provide direction if certain roles, for example, are unlikely to come back. And I also think as a leader and teaching your staff that being out of your comfort zone is actually a good skill. I think there is a famous Truman quote saying that it is a recession when your neighbor loses his job, but it's a depression when you lose yours. And I think in tough times, it's also easy to be a rabbit in the headlights. And on an individual level, I also think that you can turn every experience into something positive. My career changed during the global financial crisis. And I think a scale of this change also offers opportunity to change your career in a direction that you didn't think was possible. And I think this is something that we all should embrace and start to think a little bit positive as well in a changing environment.
You make me think, Rebecca, of an old Chinese saying. Mm-hmm. This old Chinese saying says something like, when the wind of change blows, some people will build walls, others will build windmills. Mm. Right? Take the opportunity and see what we can do with it, as it's also an opportunity, of course. But Siren, if I am a young recruit and my ambition is to move on in the organization and become one of your leaders, what should I do? How can I improve myself to be your top candidate?
Yeah. No, great question. And we've been also reflecting on that, because we also have some internal development programs and we are also doing recruitment. So what should we do to develop our people and what type of leaders should we recruit? So of course, we've been asking this question to ourselves. So our thought is no more different than what's been discussed earlier. So being an aware, vulnerable, empathic, compassionate leader is what we need at this moment, not only at this moment, but we all know we live in an uncertain world. That's a reality that has always been the reality even before COVID. And we need leaders who can deal with that. And in order to deal with that, we need these, the compassion is, I think, the right word to summarize all. I think what's critical here is that if we want to be compassionate for others, we need to be compassionate for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that, to me, comes with being mindful. So, to me, mindfulness is something that I think needs to be more and more in the curriculum of universities, of MBA programs. But also inside the company, we need to continue teaching that. What I mean by mindful is that really, like, truly being able to listen a person without having too many things in our mind, truly being able to care about another person without, thinking about 5 different things on the back of our mind. Really, we need to learn how to be mindful. And to me, that's a skill that can be taught. I mean, it doesn't come knowing it. We don't know how to do it, but we all need to learn how to do it. So that's why this is one thing that I would like to emphasize, the mindfulness, because this to me is the background work for becoming a compassionate leader. This is one. But not only being compassionate is enough at this moment. So we really need leaders who are creative. And what I mean by that is we need leaders who can build diverse teams. We need leaders who can navigate ambiguity with bold ideas. And we need leaders who, who can really keep the momentum by sharing optimism and inspiration with others. So if I really need to summarize it under 2 headings here, Marie, I would say compassionate for sure, and that can be really supported with mindfulness, but also we need creative leaders because uncertain times require a lot of creativity. And this is something that we've been working on already, but maybe we need to emphasize that a little bit more considering the world that we're living in.
So the challenge would be actually to develop programs that would help people to develop their compassionate nature and also their creativity, right?
Indeed, yeah. So these are the 2 that came very, let's say, obvious. And we asked our leaders this question: what did you learn from this crisis? Yeah. And majority of the people said, I learned that I need to be more compassionate. And I learned that I need to get more creative because this requires a lot of creativity.
Yeah. Right. You have to find solutions.
Yeah, indeed.
Right.
Quick ones.
Yeah. So, Tobias, again, you're hiring people, and there's now, as you said, there are a lot of people on the market, and a lot of people are looking for jobs, and some people, because of the crisis, lost their job, are looking for another job. And of course, there's all these new and young graduates as well, etc. If I am one of those people looking for a job, is there anything you would advise me to do to compete in a way, for a job, to be ready, because it's going to be very competitive, right? With and I'm more difficult. And as Seren said, there are other things that people want now from me that I haven't been trained for, like empathy or anything like that. So what would you advise me to do, or how could I develop?
So it also reminds me a little bit of the time when I graduated, 2008, which was, the financial crisis was already mentioned previously. So that's when I graduated. And yeah, it wasn't an easy time for everyone who graduated at that time, because if you hadn't secured a job already, it took longer to find something new. But first of all, I think people, or if you talk about CEMS graduates, it's continuing what you've already been doing, which is, engaging internationally, cherishing the international and intercultural experiences that we're making. It's something for a CEMS student that's quite normal because we're moving around, we're doing internships abroad, we study abroad. So, but it's not something every student is doing in their program. So, there's already a good foundation that might be able to set you apart a little bit, but obviously that's not necessarily enough. So you also need to be, I would say, open-minded. You might have your career plan ready in your head and you want to go into, let's say, marketing or into consulting, but maybe there is not too much opportunity at that stage. So what could be something else that can still get you to your goal, but maybe you start out a different way? For instance, I've never ever planned to be in recruiting or HR. That was never my plan, but sometimes you also discover along the way, something that you did not learn about or did not plan can be just as much fun or as interesting or even be better than what you were thinking your career was going to be. So I would say have an open mind also and look left and right. Don't just look straight ahead at the star that you're following, but there might be really interesting opportunities along the way, and you need to be susceptible to that. You need to be able to realize and recognize that. And then I think what's also important is, the network. Make use of the network. You have a great network with CEMS, LinkedIn. So try to see, who's working for that company you're really interested in. How can you engage with them? Do they have tips? Get advice from people. May that be on, the alumni platform, from your friends, family. People that might have experienced the crisis previously. I'm sure they drew learnings from that. And also never stop or never stay idle. It's okay to take some time to contemplate and see what do you really want, what's your next step, but also try to learn something new, or maybe take a risk and start something for yourself. So if that's what you want to do right now is not available on the market because companies are not hiring, can you start something on your own and gain your own experience? I think there's many things that students can do to prepare for leadership, because leadership has so many different faces that it's not just one way of getting there.
Right. Thank you. Any other comment on this? Rebecca, what would you say? How do we prepare?
No, I was going to say that because I have kids that are university age, and I had someone who, a friend of a friend was saying that he sent in 500 job applications and not a single answer. Yeah. So clearly quite demoralizing for a young person. But I think that applying for a job is like any other work. You have to be very systematic about it. You have to use all your network, put time and effort into it, and never give up and be very persistent. And I think then in the end it will pay off. Being applying some untraditional approaches, I think it also pay off.
It's also the resilience that Fatih was mentioning, right? Being resilient, picking yourself up again and again, and going back and trying again.
And I think Christine, also maybe sorry. Yes. I think it's also really important not to lose faith in yourself. Yeah. Because it can happen easily that you think, oh, something is wrong with me or my profile because I don't get any answers or just get rejections. But you still need to believe in yourself and continue and not be let down by that. I think that's also very important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Tobias. Thank you, everybody. Christine, you are at LSE. You're at the source of these people, that the future leaders, actually, and you're also very much involved in the CEMS program and the CEMS International Management Program. So is there anything that you think that business schools should do more or differently in this, so to ensure that, you know, that people find jobs, of course, but that they have all the skills, that they're still safe, but they can still, you know, manage their career, manage their own lives, and manage their careers as well in this challenging environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think this really is the challenge. And I think business schools in general really need to find creative, and we've heard the word creative already today a bit, but creative ways to continue to foster certainly global learning and global interactions, despite the fact that we have these lockdowns and these restrictions. And so I think it begs the question, how can they do this? And I would echo some of what Tobias has said in some ways. I think CEMS, obviously I'm going to be a big promoter, but I think CEMS is an organization that's extremely well placed really to leverage this amazing global network of business schools that we have and global corporate partners as well as alumni. And I think the interesting thing is that to some extent we're already really doing this. So just to give you a few examples. So CEMS, for example, has been developing and providing cross-school business projects for some time now. So this is involving global corporate partners with multiple CEMS schools to deliver these business projects. And that was happening before the pandemic. And actually the teams in place were able to pivot really nicely when the pandemic hit and to deliver virtually to their clients working globally themselves. And I think that's something that will continue. So that's sort of one aspect. I think secondly, the students themselves in CEMS have actually been brilliant through the pandemic at helping us achieve this sort of development of global learning, global interactions. And they organized, for example, an online global European forum in the spring, and that was aimed at connecting students with corporate partners to for the delivery of a series of skill seminars, and that went extremely well from what I understand. And finally, I would say just on that first point, the third thing CEMS is really focused on doing is trying to offer, and I think this differentiates us as an alliance from other business schools, cross-school, cross-country virtual courses to students. And so we have a pilot project, for example, going on this fall. Many of the CEMS business schools are involved. Many students are going to benefit from these courses that they can take elsewhere. And the idea is, regardless of what happens in January, when hopefully most of them do go on physical exchange, but regardless, we'll be able to roll out something more extensive across the network. So that's what CEMS is doing. I think it is challenging. I just give you another example at LSE, where I teach. One of the things we do most years, we've done for a good 10 years in some of the courses I teach, is we would bring our executive global masters in management students to either China or Turkey to give them an immersive experience where we would sort of teach them about international business strategy in an emerging market from a hands-on perspective. We're going to do it this year again, but we're obviously going to do it differently. So we're going to actually go to China and go to Turkey, but we're going to do it virtually. We're going to actually replicate the same company visits, the same discussions, the same panel interactions, but we'll do it with a virtual medium. So of course, these examples are not, you know, they don't bring as much value as the actual face-to-face, but I think it's really about making the best given the challenging times. And I think the final thing I would say for business schools is they also need to ensure that they maximize the skills and the technology capabilities of their educators. So obviously, you know, these are challenging new times, but we need to be able to also ensure that they can provide the highest quality teaching. So it's not only getting those global interactions, perhaps through virtual mechanisms, but making sure that the sort of skills and capability of those doing the teaching and educating is also up to speed. So I think that's what I would say.
Okay, well, I think we need to close here because our time is practically up, actually. Is there any urgent question, Rebecca?
So maybe there's just one question that we could finish this discussion off with, and that is, what best practices and practical tips can you suggest to help leaders keep a strong team spirit despite working remotely or with little or no physical interaction?
Okay, what practices and practical tips can you get to keep up
work,
the strong team spirit, right?
Yeah. I work mainly with the US, so obviously I'm London based, but the other principal sits on the US West Coast, and we do a lot of both business and social gatherings, and I think that really works well. So you have dedicated time that is business time and dedicated for any kind of personal issues or what's going on in the football seasons or whatever. And I think that really kind of normalizes interaction. And also to make sure that you change the group that you do these Zoom meetings with, so that you are, can do one-to-ones, groups, smaller groups, bigger groups, and that, recreates normal interaction.
Right, yeah. So it's communication again. Yeah. Tobias?
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I would say it's important to stay positive and look at the positive things ahead. Obviously, not denying that we are in a crisis or not talking about it, but I think you need to instill that positivity and in the team. And then, we have also had, we do have daily meetings, online meetings with the team that's across different parts of Europe, just 15 minutes a day, and then a larger team meeting. That's what we have done, just to keep everyone connected and stay up to date on what's going on.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you very much, all of you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your inspirational ideas. And we do hope that we will meet you again in another panel. This is actually, there will be other panels and there will be other discussions, and there will be a white paper as well with ideas, etc. So we at CEMS, CEMS wants to develop this whole research and this whole idea, creating ideas and creating new ways of thinking and new skills, etc. So thank you very much, all of you. Thank you also to the audience and the people who participated. Your questions will be answered later. The panel will be asked to answer your questions if there are any. You can still be in touch, and hope to see you at one of our next events.